that came through federal order last week. So we are going to hear today from George Jones, our CEO, and Tracy Collins, our food and clothing director, about what's going on at Bread for the City, our thoughts about the SNAP emergency. And it really does feel like an emergency. It very much feels like a state of emergency. And it's felt that way for a few weeks now at our food pantries. We're going to talk a little bit about the increase in need we've seen throughout the year. Even before this government shutdown started, we were already seeing about a 50% increase in foot traffic into our food pantries and the distribution that we were giving out in terms of the number of meals that we're supplying to families. And on top of that 50% increase, then we've seen hundreds of federal families, federal worker families who've been impacted coming in throughout the month of October. And now we're in November. We're in what we like to think of, as the months where we really want to be there for people around the holidays. Holiday groceries are already more expensive, and now food prices are soaring. So we are seeing record numbers of folks coming through, and we're going to hear a little bit from George and Tracy about that. We also want to hear your questions, so please post them in the chat. We'll be answering them throughout our time together. So everyone's been watching the news, right? The SNAP freeze that's happening because of the government shutdown. It's unprecedented. It's unnecessary. It's hurting the most vulnerable people in our communities. The vast majority of people that use SNAP benefits are children, the elderly, disabled folks. SNAP has been around for 60 years. It's sustained through previous government shutdowns through contingency funding. And that's the funding that a federal judge ruled last week should be used during the shutdown. It still most likely will not be enough to cover an entire month. We've heard from the DC mayor and the DC council that DC is going to step in and use emergency funding. And we have heard from our benefits attorneys that some of those payments are starting to go out to SNAP recipients who would normally get those payments in November. But the surge of clients coming through the doors, it's still happening, even with those interceptions by the DC government and other local governments. We're still seeing this surge, and it is likely to become a little bit of a new normal. The SNAP payment freeze, it gives us some insight into what might happen next year and in subsequent years after impacts from the congressional spending bill, which was passed over the summer, start to really come to fruition in a way. The bill, the congressional funding bill, many called it the big, beautiful bill. We don't think of it as beautiful, but it really is very big. Some of the cuts that happened there, especially to SNAP or to Medicaid, these are the largest cuts in US history to these programs. Those cuts are going to reduce access in ways that will cause millions of people across the country to lose access to SNAP. So the ways in which Bread for the City is responding now and working to go above and beyond and serve the community is a little bit of a window into what the coming years might look like or might need to look like. One thing that you're going to hear from George and Tracy today is that food banks and food pantries will not be able to bridge the gap, no matter how hard we try, no matter how much we want to. For every meal Bread for the City provides, for instance, SNAP is able to provide 5 meals for our clients. And the reason that that is because SNAP was never meant to supply the entire amount of groceries that a family will need for a month. On paper, it really is meant to only supply about 25 days worth of food. And that's why food pantries like Bread for the City provide an additional week or about 5 days worth of groceries. And so that's that really, 1 to 5 ratio that we're looking at. Nationwide, SNAP provides 9 times the amount of support when compared to all food banks and all food pantries combined. So it really is very challenging to think of food pantries and food banks being able to cover that gap, as quickly as is needed, with the fact that the SNAP benefits that were meant to go out on Saturday were going to be paused. And that's because these families who are using SNAP throughout the month, they're trying to make it to that 25th day. They're trying to stretch these benefits as much as they can. So they already, by the time we get to November 1st, for people who receive their payments on the 1st of the month, they've already stretched as much as they could throughout October. They're already experiencing food insecurity at the end of the month, and they really depend on that 1st of the month payment in order to go into the next month with limited food insecurity. So that is meant to set the stage a little bit of what we're dealing with over at Bread for the City. If you visited us in the last 2 weeks, you've likely seen um, abnormal amounts of people in the waiting rooms. You've seen that there are lines out of the door. That's the type of distribution level that we are not used to seeing outside of the busiest week around Thanksgiving. And then add on to that that we are now going into that Thanksgiving distribution. So I'm going to hand it right over to Tracy Collins, our food and clothing director, who's going to talk a little bit more about what she's seeing on the ground, what her staff is seeing right there in the food pantries.
Thank you, Ashley, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Just this morning, someone asked me, do you think this is all going to be over soon? As if it was a bad amusement park ride or a bad dream. And that is the feeling that folks are coming in with. Is this going to be over soon? How long is this going to last? Folks are worried about feeding their families. And there is something beautiful that we're seeing. There's a sense of community because clients are sharing tips and resources while waiting in line, but it still shouldn't have to be this way. And in general, there's also a sense of worry about what they'll do next. They're thankful for Bread for the City, but once this food runs out, where will they go? When will they get their benefits? And how will they feed their families? Last week, we experienced a significant increase in activity, as Ashley alluded to. In total, we distributed an average of 3,000 more meals each day in each center, more than last year. So that's more than 6,000 more meals a day times four. That's 24,000 more meals in a week than we saw last year. We saw many families coming back to us twice in October because they knew they needed to stock up ahead of the benefits cliff. We've also welcomed over 250 federal workers who had not previously accessed our services. I had the opportunity to actually speak with one of them today, and she never expected to be here. But now that her rent and her bills were due, she cannot make her savings stretch any further. And because of the increased need that we're seeing from both federal workers and from SNAP recipients, we had to send out an SOS for volunteers last week. And while all of our holiday hiring had already happened, we now have an immediate need for 1.5 full-time employees to support a smooth distribution of food this month, given the new patterns emerging. And so, as many are aware, we are just seeing an expansion of need. We expanded our holiday helpings goal to reflect this expansion of need. We had originally set our goal of 15,000 households. And then, as we saw in July, we saw that need increase steadily. We increased the goal to 17,000 households in August. And now, with even more increased need, we expect to go above and beyond that 17,000 and are prepared to serve up to 20,000 households if necessary. And my team is working tirelessly behind the clock trying to make sure that we have enough turkeys, chickens, fixings for folks who access our programming, both in center and through delivery. And it shows this increased need. According to our turkey tracker, which you can find on our website, so I encourage you to do so throughout the season, we have already served 514 households in just over 3 hours. We can't do this alone. We have received some support from many partners, and there are two that I wanted to highlight today. Our first support is from the Capital Area Food Bank, who is supporting us with turkey storage. Capillary Food Bank has also committed to sending us additional 2,000 pre-packed boxes that we'll be able to use for our deliveries. Speaking of deliveries, DoorDash has also committed to free deliveries during the month of November so that we can increase our capacity there. And due to that increase, that is where one of the aforementioned full-time employees would be used so that we can support those deliveries and make sure that they are getting out to households who would not otherwise be able to access our services. And to further expand our reach, we're also partnering with over 36 other organizations to reach neighbors who may not be able to come to the centers. These groups include East of the River Mutual Aid, Migrant Solidarity Mutual Aid, A Wider Circle, the Family Wellness Center, DC Public Schools, the Way of the Cross Church of Christ, and so many others, including some senior apartment buildings. These distributions happen on our behalf in the weekends, in the evenings, or via delivery to people who may not otherwise receive their holiday meal. And most importantly, regardless of how many people come through our doors, we are committed to serving each and every one of them with the bread for the city dignity and respect that they've come to know from us. And so, with that, I'll turn it over to George, who's going to talk a little bit about what is happening outside of these walls.
Thanks, Tracy. I'm glad you said to what I'm talking about because otherwise I would have been lost. Uh, thanks everybody for joining us. Yeah, these are challenging times. One of the things that's happened is we've already had one media sort of um, production this morning that focused not on how busy it is here at the Southeast Center where I am today, but also the convergence of folks coming in for need. There are people coming for the food pantry, like we've got a medical clinic here. So when somebody alluded to this earlier, when people turn to us for services, it's really just sort of a part of what they're trying to do for their families. They're trying to figure out how to access healthcare, how to make sure that they deal with any food shortages they have. And oftentimes they're still struggling to figure out how to pay the rent. And one of the things that's kind of cruel about this period we're in is that, they're talking about some of the forces related to why the government shutdown hasn't happened or shutdown hasn't ended. And part of the dilemma is, at least from my perspective, and I think this is accurate, is that if we choose to compromise on to get SNAP started, we'd probably also be sentencing 20 million people to impacts to their healthcare. Some folks actually losing their healthcare. So the dilemma we're having is that, and that this government is putting us on, is that just like the community members we serve, they want us to choose between healthcare and food security, and that's just wrong. We shouldn't have that, and we know that at Breakfast City, and we set our programs up to try to make sure the community members don't have to choose between those. That's why we have a primary care clinic at these two facilities that we own and operate, and why we have food pantries, because too often people living at the margins are having to choose between that. We're excited that we've got funders who are on the call. We're excited that we've got individuals and community members who've been responsive to our request to support our efforts. So both, as Ashley mentioned earlier, this is our busiest time of the year because it's holiday helping season. This is when we know families are going to want to be able to enjoy turkey or other sort of protein that they want to have for their holiday meals, and all the trimmings that we provide. Originally I think we were thinking 15,000 families this month, and now we're thinking that it probably will spike up to closer to 20,000 families that we'll serve. And the reporter who was here this morning was asking me, how does this compare to what we've done in the past? I don't think we've ever done 20,000 families. So you're talking about an all-time high. And that only gets exacerbated by the fact that we've got people coming who are furloughed workers and other folks who've been impacted by this economy, and people who are worried about SNAP. And so even though the government has said, the local government, DC government has said, like in many states, that they're going to, and they've actually started, I think, to fund some of the SNAP programming. The community members don't know that. They haven't heard that yet. They can't rely on that. And so, it's not surprising that we've seen this really long lines already this morning on the first day of sort of holiday helping season. And I anticipate that it could get worse before it gets better, because I just don't know how much people are going to trust that they're going to get their benefits. Not everybody gets them on the first of the month. And so a lot of people are going to come to just make sure they've got enough stuff in their families. We appreciate what the funders can do. One of the things that we sent some messages out a week or so ago, saying to some of our funding partners that we might even think about, cash assistance or some other strategies. And so one of the reasons we wanted to do this briefing today is to talk a little bit about, what we might do given some of the eventualities that may play themselves out when you think about what's happening at the government, at the federal level, at the local level, and what's happening in community. And we certainly know the board of directors here at Bread for the City has empowered us to try to figure out how to do the most we can for the community members we're here. And we just hope that those of you who joined us will partner with us as we try to make sure that we can live up to that commitment that Tracy talked about, which is turning nobody away, no matter how many people who turn to Bread this month. so that we can help them and know no matter where they come from, whether they're furloughed workers, whether they're community members who live on the margins sort of year in and year out, or any other folks who turn to us for services. So excited that we're going to hopefully we'll have a bit of a dialogue today. Looking forward to any questions we can answer for you or any ideas you have to share with us. With that in mind, I'm going to kick it back to Ashley and see where we go from here.
Thanks, George, and thanks, Tracy, for just providing more information about what you're seeing, what you're hearing from community members. One great thing about Bread for the City is we really are a center spoke in a lot of the resource navigation that happens in Washington, D.C. So we're partnered with a lot of other organizations to try to figure out how are they responding, what are their clients telling them. And it's a really similar story across the district. 97% of Bread for the City's clients are SNAP recipients. You know, SNAP recipients tend to be people who live at or below the federal poverty line, and the basically vast majority of Bread for the City's clients are living under that federal poverty line, which means the vast majority of them qualify for SNAP. Often we're asked if we need any help registering people for SNAP or getting the word out about SNAP as a program. And pretty often we don't actually need help with that because the DC area, especially the district itself, people here are very aware about what their resources are, what they qualify for. People are not able to register for SNAP while the government is shut down, which is problematic in its own right. But we have a fair amount of people, 140,000 DC residents, which equals about 85,000 families or family units or households who are benefiting from SNAP, who are using SNAP in one way, shape, or another. We don't know if it's only going to last the month of November. We don't know if we're looking into um, even more of a crisis. Even a day that goes by that people don't have access to their SNAP benefits is a crisis for a family, and any family that's in crisis across the district, especially if you multiply that by 140,000, that's a crisis for all of us, and that's an emergency for everybody. And so what is Bread for the City doing, or what can you all be doing to think through this with us? Of course, yes, please put your questions in the chat and we'd be happy to direct them. But in the meantime, there's a lot that we are needing from a fundraising standpoint. As many of you know, Bread for the City operates all of our programs for free. And that means that all of our programs are supported through donations. Not all donations are private donations. About 11 to 14% of our funding does come from the federal government. I'm sure many of you have seen news stories about nonprofit organizations feeling that their federal funding is under threat. While our federal funding has not been taken away or hasn't really been lost up until this point, we are worried about the coming years. We're worried about when aspects of the spending bill, the big beautiful bill, get put into place in 2026, 2027, what that will mean for our federal support. The biggest thing about federal dollars is that they are heavily regulated. And so to keep us nimble, to keep us flexible, really to keep us independent so we can make choices that are best for our community, that's where we need private donation support. That's where individuals, foundations, corporations, private entities who are going to donate to us, those private dollars keep us flexible, keep us able to provide the care that we want to provide, even if the federal dollars are being stipulated in a really specific and really narrow way. Like Tracy talked about, like George talked about, we are on day one of holiday helpings. This is usually a really joyful time at Bread for the City because this is when people are coming in to get holiday groceries. Holiday groceries in November, December, they're more expensive. We all have seen the inflation to food prices when you walk in through the grocery store. It's hitting all households relatively hard. When these SNAP dollars do not go out, when the $9 billion in SNAP funding in November doesn't go out into the pockets of the 42 million people who receive SNAP benefits, those dollars are also then not spent in the community, not spent economically at for instance, 400 businesses in DC that accept EBT, that accept the electronic transfer credits on somebody's SNAP debit card that's provided to them by the government. For every dollar that the government spends on SNAP, more than $1.50 is generated in the economy. So if those local businesses, local grocery stores, grocery store chains aren't receiving those $9 billion, food prices for all of us are just going to continue to go up. So we would ask everybody to get in touch with your congressperson, your senator. You probably already have, if you've joined this call and are worried about SNAP and how it's impacting your community. But if you haven't yet, it's a pretty easy phone call or email. Check in with them on what they're doing in order to resolve the government shutdown and what they're doing to put pressure on the federal government to release those USDA contingency funds. The district, through the Office of the Attorney General, along with 24 other states, did bring suit against the administration, asking for the USDA to release those funds. That there was a federal judge on Thursday of last week who said that they recommended that the funds be released, and the federal government does need to respond today. So they're working on their response now. Very hopefully, those funds that are being held in contingency with the USDA will be released. But we know it's not going to be the full 9 billion that the entire month needs. And if the government is shut down into December, what does that mean? So my recommendation is that people turn very hyper local. Bread for the City is focused here on the DC population here in the district. We are working across all of our partners to figure out how do we support the 140,000 people in the district that are on SNAP. But there's ways to get involved with us, and I'm going to talk about those in a minute. But there's also ways to get involved with mutual aid, turning to your neighbors. If you live in a building, who in your building might need extra help? Can there be meal trains? Every day, I'm hearing about more and more of these really local neighbor to neighbor solutions. And it's unfortunate that we have to do this, that people who are not impacted during the SNAP payment freeze are kind of walking around their neighborhood and thinking about where to help because people are using their own dollars for this when there's government money that is taxpayer money that's sitting there. But it is really heartening to see all of this activity and everybody coming to Bread for the City and saying, what can we do? Our response to SNAP being potentially frozen right now is holiday helpings. Holiday helpings, in a way, it's good timing. In a way, it's horrible timing, as I said before, because we're going into the holidays. It's horrible that families are having to decide between their health care, getting their kids to school by putting gas in their car, paying for prescriptions for their elderly parents they're taking care of, and food. Right as we're getting into Thanksgiving and the December holidays, it's awful. But for us at Bread for the City, it's a time that we can help more. We provide more food on average to people who come in through holiday helpings. We're giving them more items that they can take home with them and they can make their own recipes. We don't provide prepared food, we're providing groceries. That way, our community members can go back into their homes and they can create whatever recipe they need to create, whatever meal the holidays mean to them. So really our response to what can we be doing more during this SNAP freeze, during this government shutdown, support holiday helpings. We are looking, like George and Tracy said, to support upwards of 20,000 families. So that will be a really high number of families for us, the biggest holiday helpings that we've done in this way. In order to support the original 17,000 families that we had planned to support, we need to raise $1.2 million collectively as a community. This is a completely free program that we give out to our community members, and it's fully funded by private donations. There's no government funding that goes into holiday helpings. It's fully funded by you, individuals, foundations, corporations. And in order to raise that initial 1.2 million, that really is looking like it's going to cost, $35 per person that's going to come in. So what we think about when we ask people to support holiday helpings is, can you give a donation to cover a family? Can you give a donation of $75 to cover a small family? Or really $100 covers around a family of 4. And so if you take that $100 and you multiply it by however many families you want to help this holiday season, that's one way to really give back. It's very quantifiable. I was able to step in and help this many families, 97% of which are, SNAP recipients who are really in crisis right now. Holiday Helpings is also a fundraising campaign that's built on the backs of people who create fundraising drives. It's a peer-to-peer campaign. It's been a peer-to-peer campaign almost the entire 34 years that it's existed. And so one way to get involved is to go to breadforthecity.org/holiday helpings. Put that link in the chat for everybody. And when you go to that link, it's going to give you the opportunity to start a fundraising drive. It's a great opportunity to get together with your neighborhood, with people in your network, to announce to people, okay, this is the way that I'm going to help right now because there's so much uncertainty, there's so many emergencies happening, and this is one simple way that I can help is to reach out to my community and raise these funds. In order to support the extra 3,000 families that we're looking to support, in order to give out 20,000 holiday meal kits instead of 17,000, that costs Bread for the City about 200,000 extra dollars. Food for us is more expensive right now too. Food is more expensive for everybody. And so we're really looking to the community to come together to think of holiday helpings as one way that we can be giving back. So that's my stump speech about holiday helpings. I'm going to go through some of the questions. Please use the question and answer feature and send us some of your questions. All three of us will try to answer where appropriate. The first question is that we mentioned that some of the DC emergency funds to cover the SNAP gap were already going out. Do we have any more information on that? How much has gone out? How are recipients being prioritized? I will take the first stab at this, and then, of course, George and Tracy, feel free to jump back in. The fact that we had to ask around to a fair amount of our partners over the last couple of days to figure out exactly what's going on with the SNAP payments, the DC Emergency Fund, is a really good indicator that they're really building this plane while they're flying it, which is completely to be expected. In the 60 years that SNAP has existed, the states and the district have never had to figure out how to get emergency funds out to SNAP recipients because the government's always used the contingency funds. We have heard that some of these payments are starting to go out. The way that SNAP works is that you don't, everyone is not all paid on the first of the month. It's split up by your last name. And so the way that SNAP tends to be prioritized is you might have always the first of the month or the 15th of the month or the 20th of the month, but your EBT card is filled on that day. So I might be told that on the 5th of the month is always when my benefits come. So they're prioritizing it in the same way. People who missed their payments on the first of the month, they are prioritized first because they haven't had payments since the 1st of October, and so on and so forth. That's my understanding. George, have you heard anything different?
No, I do anticipate that incremental kind of payment of the SNAP benefits. And of course, November 1st, I guess, would have been the first day that folks started missing. So we're on the 3rd. But we haven't heard officially. I know we were doing some digging ourselves. So stay tuned. In fact, if we get any additional information, we'll try to fire it out to people who are on this call and certainly share with our sort of community of stakeholders. So thanks for
Yeah.
the question.
Yeah, thanks. We're also, working with our partners in the community to figure out exactly what this looks like. And we're also waiting in anticipation to read or see the federal response to the lawsuit that went out. This is a great question about corporate partnerships. In terms of corporate partners, is the call for support greater to support donations or volunteers? Or given the size of the crisis, is it a mixture of both or something else entirely? I think you got it right there at the end. Unfortunately, the size of the crisis is that, we need to be able to pay for food in order to get the food out to the community. So monetary donations are, of course, prioritized, but Tracy can tell you the need for volunteers in the pantry is pretty urgent as well. But yeah, Tracy or George, would you prioritize monetary donations or volunteering or both?
We have seen a great deal of volunteers stepping up. And so I think right now I would prioritize monetary donations. And so I thank you. If you have already signed up to volunteer, thank you so much. That is incredibly powerful and supportive to us. But I do believe we've had a lot of folks step in recently to fill that gap. So
Yeah,
Thank you.
about volunteers, it's amazing. Again, downstairs, we've got community members. That's one of the things I think has been really impressive, that I can tell that a lot of the folks who are actually helping us come from the community here in Southeast. So that's been really inspiring. I got a call this morning from the Ward 5 mutual aid group asking if we could offer some holiday turkeys and meals for groups of folks they have. I also got a call last week from a group in Northeast asking the same thing. So in a lot of ways, that kind of demand really does speak to the fact that we're going to really be trying to purchase a lot more stuff that we may not actually distribute ourselves, but we will be partnering with other community members and community groups who are going to get so we think that some of the 20,000 holiday meals that'll be in turkeys and trimmings that'll be distributed will be done in partnership with folks, which is why our ability to purchase them in some ways is a big priority right now. So any contributions for those expenses would be really welcome.
Yeah, Tracy, can you speak for just a minute about the partners that we have across the community during holiday helpings, the other food pantries or organizations that we provide supplies to?
Yes, so we currently have over 36 uh, organizations that are partnering with us, and a wait list of folks who want to partner with us, but we are not sure we have the supplies to do so at the moment. And so these are folks that are senior apartment buildings. We have the Way of the Cross Church of Christ, Bethesda Baptist Church, um, Deshaun Cares, World Missions, DYRS, East of the River Mutual Aid, Migrant Solidarity Mutual Aid, a wider circle, and Ward 4 Mutual Aid. So these are folks who are reaching out for support. They've all seen their need increase. DC Public Schools has also reached out. They have families who are looking for turkeys, and a lot of them know that their families either cannot get to Bread for the City, or they're a trusted community partner, and so folks feel like they can trust going to someone that they're more connected to, like a healthcare provider or a school counselor. Whereas going to a whole new organization, even though Bread for the City, it has been a name in so many households, it's not in everybody's household. It's not the first line of support. So we do this. This kind of expands our reach. Folks are able to distribute on weekends. A lot of churches are distributing on Saturdays. So folks who maybe are working during the week or have no way to get here during the week can get to a church for their Thanksgiving turkey as well.
I'm also
Thank you.
reminded that we recently the group of Ward 8 CEOs have been meeting really sort of in response originally to the concerns about the healthcare crisis, but we continue to meet as we got closer to the holiday season. And a good example of what can happen when the community comes together is that one of our partners reached out to Capital One and told them that several of us were going to be trying to distribute turkeys. And to make a long story short, we ended up getting a gift of about $100,000 that are being split between three groups: Bread for the City, Martha's Table, and the 11th Street Bridge Project, or the ARC, to get as many, to use those dollars to serve as many families as we can. So that's the kind of work we're doing in community. And this briefing in some ways is just an extension of that sort of community-wide effort.
Yeah, so to Tracy's point, the more people we partner with or the more organizations, it really helps the holiday meal distribution reach, expand the reach, expand the capacity. And to George's point, if funders are interested in collective impact or collective funding, there are so many coalition groups or informal groups like George and the other Ward 8 CEOs who get together of nonprofits that are already talking and already figuring out some solutions. And so if that's something that funders are interested in, let us know. We would love to bring you into those conversations. Really being able to help more than one organization is a really creative way to expand that collective impact. George, here's a question. If you want to take this one, is there anything in particular the DC legal community should be thinking about in terms of targeted ways to help? So legal community members wondering how can they be helpful?
It's a good question. It's probably sort of goes back and forth. I mean, they can certainly be prepared for the fact that when we see people coming to our our community centers that oftentimes they have issues that extend beyond food insecurity. And even though we have our own legal practices, sometimes some of our legal partners either have more capacity or maybe even expertise may be focused in a practice area that bread doesn't offer. And so we certainly welcome the ability to continue to send community members to them for legal support. And then they, but by the same token, I think invariably they'll run into people who are expressing food insecurity as one of the things that they are challenged with. And so to send them our way is something that we sort of welcome for the legal services community.
Mhm.
And again, we have a long-standing history, and there's a legal service coalition, and so we tend to know each other. But and we're interested in any ideas, by the way. And so anybody who's in the legal services community, I guess the other thing I would say is that there's also the for-profit legal community who we try to reach out to, and so the larger legal corporations that can provide the kind of support we've been talking about today, the kind of financial support is obviously something else we're trying to solicit right now.
I would say that nonprofits depend on pro bono legal support, not just for the direct legal support of clients, but also for organizational legal support. For instance, there's a lot of legal questions that we are asking ourselves that we haven't had to ask ourselves before. So going to the legal community to be able to say, is this how the law is changing? That's the type of additional support that you could be offering, not just Bread for the City, but all types of nonprofits right now who do not have general counsels, do not have that type of infrastructure when it comes to, legal staffing. Tracy, there's a question about the additional employees that you think you might need to bring on to the food pantry. I know you talked a bit about seasonal work. If you are seeing this increase in distribution need, would the 1.5 employees needed to support the delivery program or this increase be a sustained role? Is that just going to be during the DoorDash delivery period, while DoorDash is increasing the amount of deliveries they're doing for free? Or what are you thinking about the longer term needs might be around staffing?
Great question. We are anticipating that to be a roll through December, to kind of get us through, just to make sure that we are back, trying to be hopefully back near a sense of normal come December. This will get us through the holiday season, the holiday helping season, but also we know that December will be another busy time as folks try to kind of stretch their dollars to make the most of the holiday season. So just to make sure that we have enough support on the ground, and here to provide staffing, support, moving all the food around. There's so much work that has to be done
Mhm.
with unloading trucks and serving people. So great
No, I
question.
appreciate that.
And
The
just
amount of
to pick
infrastructure. Go ahead, George.
just to piggyback on that, because I know I have the authority to say this on by Tracy's behalf, is of course we get to the end of December and we'll really reassess what we need in terms of capacity. And so I don't think it's a hard and fast rule, although we do know that these seasonal workers sort of go through this particular busy season for us. But we'll turn to Tracy and the other food program staff to let us know sort of what the challenges are going into 2026, particularly if this shutdown extends further than we are, because who knows what we'll be dealing with in terms of continued increased demand.
Yeah, so let's talk just a little bit about if the shutdown extends. One of the questions here, George, is about how we're approaching or thinking about cash assistance or direct cash giving. With the federal case that was brought and the fact that the federal government is responding to that today, and the fact that states are stepping up and doing some emergency giving, that's all well and good if the government reopens in a couple weeks. But if we go into more months, more weeks, with the government essentially shuttered, are we thinking about approaching cash assistance or emergency giving in that way?
Cautiously.
Mhm.
Bread has a economic security program here, department that is, that sort of really sprung up from the pandemic. And when we first started experimenting with cash assistance, it was a really popular thing to do. It really worked well. That, we had Thrive East of the River that had 500 plus people that got direct cash assistance. We had um, excluded workers fund that had thousands of more people, and it was funded by private and public sources. And we saw a lot of success in providing direct cash assistance to families in need. So bread is in that business, so to speak. But we also know that it can be challenging both in terms of administering that and in terms of sustaining it. And so those are the things we'll be weighing and to see if there's an appetite from the community. There was really an appetite during the pandemic for both individuals and foundations to fund that kind of work. We're very much open to it if the support for that is there. I think the other thing I'll say, and actually you know more about this, is that we've created a bit of a cash assistance, I guess, a debit card assistance for folks who've been affected by the sort of threat of ICE and some of the deportations activity that's been happening in DC. So we're kind of gearing up for that too. It's one of the other things that's happening during this period. I keep calling it the crazy vortex of things that are hitting us all at one time. And Bread, like as we always do, are trying to be as responsive to all of these things that are happening in our ecosystem as we can. I'm not sure if that answered the question, but we're prepared to do as much as we can to support in that way.
No, I think it's really helpful for people to understand the longer term vision or what could be useful. Just to build off a bit about the fund that George talked about, there is a fund called the Children's Bridge Fund. It's a really great example of a true coalition. Bread for the City manages this fund with another organization, DC Action, and there are 6 additional partners that work on this fund. And it's specifically identifying families with children, with dependent children who have been impacted by the ICE the surge in policing that we saw since August, for instance. Between January and August, before the government takeover, or before DC was occupied, for lack of a better word, there are about 85 known ICE arrests in DC and detentions. But throughout August and at least halfway through September, which is all the information we have, there was almost 2,000. And so you can see that that was like a really serious spike when you compare 85 over the course of 8 months to about 2,000 people in just 6 weeks. And so this fund came together with a coalition of community partners trying to think about how to get direct cash assistance out into these families. A lot of times the person detained is a wage earner, is a lot of times the breadwinner of these families. And so that's one way that Bread for the City is looking to help. But we're really open to your ideas. We're open to what you've heard is working in the community. We're really excited about our direct cash giving program, CashRx, and the findings, the early reports that we're seeing from this small cohort that's supported by Bread for the City with a guaranteed basic income, and the health outcome results that we're seeing. DC has really experienced some negative. If you look at DC like a report, like we're giving it a report card, there's a lot of negative statistics in DC around health and human services when it comes to health outcomes and the social determinants of health that impact those outcomes. Nutrition's a big one. Hunger is a huge social determinant of health. You're not going to have good health outcomes in a city where 140,000 people who rely on SNAP aren't getting their benefits. And what we're seeing when we look at direct cash is the availability of just an economic floor. What that does to people's health, both physical and behavioral, is really inspiring to see. And if anyone's interested in that data, I'm really happy to share it with you. So that's the end of our questions. If anyone else has a question, I'm going to pause for like an uncomfortable 15 full seconds for you to put it in the Q&A. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Oh, there's one more question. Thank you for waiting for my 15 seconds. How is staff doing? I'm gonna let Tracy or George answer that question. How is staff doing during this, what can only be described as an emergency?
Thank you. Thank you for thinking of the team. They are tired, but they are committed. We have an incredible team who is committed to making sure that everyone who comes in is served with dignity and respect. And so they're tired, but they are pushing forward. They welcome If you stop by and bring coffee or pizza, they welcome you to stop by anytime. Hugs, and just notes of appreciation at any time are welcome. So thank you.
Well, to take it a step further, we are planning to, and we've got to coordinate with Tracy, but we're planning to provide lunches for our staff because we know that last week, certainly I heard directly that people were literally working through lunch just to deal with the long lines that we were already seeing. And the lines are going to get longer this month. We know that. So we've got to figure out logistically how to get that food to people. But that's our plan. Management is planning to make sure that we can provide free lunches to our frontline staff because we just think that one, it's the equitable thing to do, but we think if we're going to really keep the trains on schedule here, we're going to have to do it just to make it realistic for our staff.
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's so nice. Um, any other final questions from the group? Do like an uncomfortable 10-second pause this time. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us during what is probably your all's lunch hour, and you all are working through lunch by joining this and listening to us talk about what's happening here on the ground at Bread for the City. I put the link in the chat to our Holiday Helpings website. You can learn a lot more information there. You can sign up for volunteer shifts there. We need, a bunch of volunteers at both centers, and all the shift information is right there. If you're interested in volunteering as a group, as a corporate group, a foundation group, a group of your neighbors, if you want to bring a group together, my email is in the chat now, adom@breadforthecity.org. Feel free to get in touch with me. If you have any questions about ways that you can support during holiday helpings, feel free to shoot me an email, give me a call. Tracy, George, and I are all available to you all for any questions that you might have. And as this continues, every day there's something new. If we find out what the federal government is responding, if we learn more about how the DC program is rolling out for SNAP recipients here in the district, if we learn more about how the government shutdown's impacting people, we will get that information out to you best that we can. And so if you don't hear from us for a few days and you want to know what's going on, shoot me an email and I'll let you know. This is a news story that's moving really rapidly and really quickly. And so you all caring about this at noon on a Monday is really just hope filling for us that there are so many people who care about this topic, so many people who want to help their neighbors. So thank you all very, very much. And thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.